Number 1. The pool. I remember growing up in the 1980s and having things so different than they are right now. And my family didn't even have air conditioning back then. It seems so basic nowadays. Also, there wasn't as much to do inside. Not such a proliferation of video games, and I think about 5 people in the world had the internet. Summer vacations were often very dull after a while, and always pretty hot and sweaty. When I was 13 years old, I began hanging out with a guy named Jack. It was a bit more daring than I ever was. One night, when we were deep into summer break, and watching movies on our newfangled VCR, as well as completely sweating our butts off in the hot summer night, Jack had an idea. He thought the two of us could go down to the local swimming pool, climb over the gate, and cool off in the pool. While I didn't really enjoy the idea of trespassing, it wasn't too difficult for him to convince me. It was about midnight when we got to the pool, and it was completely dark there. The fence surrounding the pool was decently high, but it was not really anything a couple of teenage boys would have any problem getting over. Jack and I quickly scaled the fence and set ourselves down in the pool area. Our local pool had a tendency to get really busy during the day, so having this to ourselves was quite a surreal experience. We wore our swimsuits, so we quickly jumped into the water. And yeah, it felt so much better than I can even begin to explain. Jack and I had a lot of fun at the pool. We did some cannonballs, splashed a lot of water, and just had a great time. After a while, I dared Jack to do something that neither of us had ever had the courage to do. I dared him to jump off the highest diving board. I could sort of tell he really didn't want to, but as I mentioned, Jack was a bit more of the adventurous type, so he eventually gave in. I stayed at the opposite side of the pool, so I could egg him on. My back was to the pool building, where the showers and entrance to the pool were. Jack slowly climbed up to the top of the ladder. He was watching his feet the entire time, not really looking in my direction. I could tell that he was scared, but he was trying his best to not let on. Once he got to the top, he slowly began walking out on the board. Again, his eyes were constantly on his feet, and he wasn't really paying attention to me at all. It wasn't until I yelled at Jack, daring him to just do it, that he finally looked up from his feet and over at me. It was hard knowing for sure from such a distance, but Jack suddenly looked very alarmed and almost downright scared. He made a motion towards me, but then he slipped on the board and fell right into the water. Fortunately, he fell forward and didn't hit any part of his body on the board. He did hit the water hard, though. I immediately began swimming for my friend. He didn't resurface very quickly, but fortunately for him, I was quite the fast swimmer. I dived down and found him struggling to swim back to the surface. I grabbed onto my friend, pulled him back up and out of the water, dragging him onto the cement. Jack was panicked, but that made sense because he had just had a pretty harrowing experience. But I soon learned that wasn't why he was so edgy. He quickly got to his feet and went to grab his shoes and t-shirt, telling me to get mine and to get over to the gate. I hesitated, not sure why Jack was so excited, but he yelled at me to do what he told me, and I did. We quickly got over the fence. I did cut myself on a barb this time, and Jack jumped from the top of the fence down to the ground. He twisted his right ankle slightly, but that didn't stop him from running. When we finally got back to my place, Jack told me what had caused him to fall. When he looked up at me, he saw a man approaching me from behind, holding what looked like a small hatchet. The man had emerged from the showers and was only a few steps away from me. Jack had fallen so quickly that it caused me to swim away from the man. When I pulled him out, he hadn't seen the man anymore. He thought he probably was hiding back in the shower room, waiting for us to go through it. Regardless, he just wanted to get over the gate and out of that place. Normally, I might not have believed him. It seemed such an outlandish story. I mean, why would a man with a hatchet be in the locker room of a local swimming pool? But even 30 years later, he maintains it was true. And the reason I believe him is that my buddy is not really the type to get scared of much of anything. But decades later, this story still freaks him out. Number 2. Reading. When I was a teenager, summers were pretty unbelievable. They were not only hot, but my family didn't have AC. Summer television was also pretty lousy. It wasn't like nowadays, when they have summer seasons. Everything was reruns, other than soap operas and Johnny Carson. I wasn't really much of an outdoor kid anyway, so being out of school was a bit of a pain as well. So I used my summertime usually to read, and I started reading stuff like Stephen King, which I tended to read pretty late into the night. It is weird, remembering how things used to be back then. I mean, laying on the couch in the living room by myself, usually with all the lights off, except for a lamp that was behind me, reading a horror novel hours into the night. I would also generally be getting a little sweaty too, and that's the part that gets me the most nowadays. I didn't even think much about the sweat, because I was always sweating in the house. If I had been like that today, it would really disgust me. On the night this happened, it was about midnight. I was laying on the couch in the living room, reading. I had seen a few flashes of lightning outside, and heard a few cracks of thunder. I figured that a storm was on its way, and that there might be a drop in the air pressure outside, so I thought I'd open up the windows in the living room, try and cool off. It took a while, but as the storm got closer, the room finally began to cool off. It was also cool to me, but I was also going to be able to have a bit of a storm accompanying the scary book I was reading. There was a lot of thunder and lightning without rain. At one point, I finally heard a couple drops of rain hitting the house. I thought that I should at least shut the windows part way, so that the air could come in, but without the rain. When I looked up at the window, it took my eyes a moment to adjust, but when they did, I jumped and yelled a bit when I saw that someone was at my window, looking in at me. At first the man didn't seem like he was going to leave. He reached up and started fiddling with the screen in the window. He actually very quickly removed the screen, and the guy actually began crawling in through the window. I screamed for my dad at the top of my voice. The guy quickly came in the window and came straight at me. He was holding a knife. I fell back against my chair as the guy was coming towards me. He got his hand on me, but I grabbed his wrist with my hands, preventing me from being stabbed. The guy seemed surprised I was putting up such a struggle. I guess that occupied his mind enough that he was distracted and didn't hear my dad as he came out of his bedroom with his gun and shot the man who was trying to attack me with the knife. The guy dropped the knife and fell down, grabbing the wound. I grabbed the knife and ran over to my father. My mother was already on the phone, calling the police. I had thought that my dad reacted pretty quickly to what had happened. He explained to me that he had been watching on the news that there had been several homes broken into in the town, and several young people had been attacked. He had his gun sitting in his nightstand just in case. Well, when he heard me screaming, he was more than ready to come and help out. I guess if I had been watching television, I would have been less likely to have been laying there with the windows open after midnight. Fortunately, my dad was able to protect me. Number 3. The credit cards. I started walking to the store every day for that day's groceries. It was my way of trying to get a little extra exercise once it began getting hotter outside. It pretty quickly became quite a sweaty affair once the sun really began pounding down on me, though. For you to understand what happened in this story, I have to explain to you what my walk is like. I live in a housing subdivision just out of town. I walk out of the subdivision and onto a minor highway. There is a bridge then that covers a forested area in which a set of train tracks run through. Once you get over the bridge, you walk a little more and turn right into the road where all the stores in town are. Right off the road, along the highway, before making it to the businesses, is a pretty steep hill with a really thick forest. The train runs right through this forest. I had been walking for a few weeks when this happened. It was the day after a thunderstorm, and it was very hot and muggy out. But I needed to get to the store. I set out for my walk. Right before I got to the bridge, I noticed something odd. Someone's credit card was lying on the ground. I didn't really want to touch it because it seemed grimy, so I left it there. I took a few more steps, and I saw what was very obviously someone's driver's license or state ID card. This was also grimy, but I was curious, so I took my foot and turned it over. It looked like a teenager. I read the name, but again did not pick up the card. I just kept walking. I then came upon a folded up personal check lying on the ground. This I didn't even pay much attention to. I just kept walking. I thought it was a little odd, but when you walk along a highway, you often see weird things laying on the side of the road. Yes, this was a little more strange than the random sock or condom wrapper, but still, I didn't think much about it. Now, I recall that the credit card I had seen was a PayPal MasterCard. I remember because I'd never actually known that such a thing even existed. The following day, I once again went on a walk. I was surprised when I found a second credit card laying on the ground before I got to the bridge. This one was an American Express card. I started thinking that maybe I should pick the card up, find out who it belonged to, and see about getting it back to them. But truthfully, I didn't want to touch it, and figured that if the cards all belonged to the same person, that this person must have canceled them all by that point. I put it out of my mind and went on my way. I went out the next day, immediately thinking about the credit cards, and wondering if I was going to come across another one. It seemed a bit unlikely, but I kept thinking it might be possible. Lo and behold, I did come across a third, and then a fourth credit card during this walk. I flipped them over again, and this time I noticed that they were all the same name, and that name was also the name that was on the state ID card that I had found on the first day. I decided to check around for the card, and I eventually found it. I put the cards in my bag, and decided I'd stop at the sheriff's on my way home, and drop them off there, just in case someone had been looking for them. Well, turning the cards into the police had a reaction I had not expected. They had a lot of questions for me. They asked me where I'd found them, when I had found them, did I know the guy they belonged to, where was I the night of the thunderstorm that had hit, before all this had happened. It was a lot of questions for something I honestly thought would just be a good deed. They did explain to me eventually, however, that the guy who owned the cards had gone missing the night of the storm. He was a teenager who worked at a local fast food restaurant. He never came home from work, and his parents had reported him missing. Having told the police where I found all the cards, they went and checked out the forest around the train tracks. They found the boy's body. It had obviously been taken and thrown down the hill on the side of the road and had been lying there since the night of the thunderstorm. He had accepted a ride home from a stranger that night, and it ended up being the worst mistake he ever made. I feel myself occasionally feeling really guilty about what happened, although I couldn't have helped the guy at all. If I had reported the cards to the police several days earlier, at least the parents could have known what had happened to their son a few days before. Heyo, Killer Orange Cat here. I just thought I'd update everyone who has been hearing me promote my friend's GoFundMe campaign over the past 2 months. It has made a remarkable difference and has greatly helped. I've been able to help him find a temporary place to live, and he has had insulin as he needed it. I've taken a bit of time to also help rectify the income situation, and I want you to know that it has gone well, and it's due to the fact that there are caring and helpful people out there. Thank you. You all give me great joy to know there are giving and caring people in this world. Please know that everyone who has donated or shared the link so far, your donations and your efforts have made a huge difference. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the button below, or wait for the button of Ichigo that will appear at the end of this closing. Leave me a comment to let me know what you thought of the video, and share it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. Just please know that the one requirement I have is that the story is original and has not appeared on any other channel. In the meantime, please don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.